One of the things that I bring up quite frequently is how Wing Chun is so much more like fencing than it is like modern boxing. And of course, we know that old school boxing, bare knuckle English boxing, and by extension French and the regional boxing that happened in Europe in the 17 and 1800s, most of those guys were fencers first, which is why the early boxing included a lot more parrying and whatnot, and then boxing evolved as its own thing later. And so it should be no surprise whatsoever that empty hand systems, especially early ones, tend to resemble fencing at times. And one of the things I want to draw parallels for you is a connection between two systems that I study, which are, of course, Wing Chun and Marozzo's fencing, which is part of kind of the Bolognese tradition, if that's even a thing that exists, because that is something contentious. But generally speaking, right, people accept it as part of the Bolognese tradition. And Marozzo just happens to have one of the more comprehensive books available, whereas the other Bolognese books tend to omit more pieces than Marozzo. So one of the things that we need to look at is like how Ip Man taught in the first place. And I will try to provide some links down below so that we can, so you can see the verification for these. But Roland Tong, who, at least to my current knowledge, is still teaching at the Hong Kong Wing Chun Association, said in an interview a couple of years ago that, Ip Man trained each student according to their own abilities and their own understanding. He wasn't he didn't run it like a military academy where everybody does the same thing and everybody's a carbon copy. It was much more coaching than teaching, if that makes sense. And when we get to an interview with Hawkins Chung, and I believe this interview was in the 90s. I don't have it right offhand. And I'll definitely link to this one because I believe the interview is still up online. And Hawkins Chung, said back in the 1950s, Ip Man trained us to fight, not be technicians. And then, goes on for a little bit and goes, Ip Man taught us the distance applications of Wing Chun. He taught them how to be fighters first. And in another part of the interview, he recounts Ip Man saying, "Look, don't believe me. Test it out for yourself. Go have a fight and test it out. I might be tricking you, right? I might be full of shit. Go test it out for yourself. Learn it for yourself." And so in that case, right, you kind of learn the big, gross skills first, and then you learn the fine stuff, the more technical stuff later, which is kind of traditionally how martial arts have been taught anyway. Well, that brings us to something from Marozzo. So, right, here's the Marozzo book. There is a free translation by Bill Wilson available. This is a better translation by Jarek Swanger, which this one costs money. I can put a link anyway for you. And he tells you to put a diagram on the wall, which he has a cutting diagram in the book. He's like, paint this on the wall with the cutting angles labeled out and have them do their basic blows. Have them practice their basics first. Then when they've got that, after 4 or 5 sessions, you have them do their guards. And once they learn the principal blows and the principal guards, then you can start doing some supervised fencing and partner drills and whatnot. And Marozzo goes on to say, and this goes right along with what Hawkins Chung was saying, if they want to try some presse, we'll get into that in a second, or blows at the half sword, then tell them they must try such presse or blows while fencing so that they come to know them through practice. It's the same concept, right? He's saying after you learn your basics, test it out, try it out in action so you learn the basics through action. Now, there's something that we kind of know, when it comes to education and whatnot, the things that we learn through self-discovery seem to stick a little bit better, especially if we have a good platform as a jumping off point for that self-discovery, so the cognitive load's not too heavy. And so the things you learn for yourself, the things you discover for yourself while playing, tend to work a little bit better as far as being able to stick and so that you can embody and own the skill. That's a pretty cool thing. So we used that term presse there. Well, presse literally just means to take or catch. It's literally grappling. And he said the half sword. Well, some of you who follow fencing may be familiar with the term half sword that gets used in German fencing, which literally means to grab the sword at halfway up the blade and use it kind of like you would use a quarterstaff. But in this case, when Marozzo uses the term half sword, what he's talking about is crossing swords, what we would often call the bind, or in Wing Chun we call bridging. This is an important place to be at. And this is kind of the place where things are both more dangerous, but also can become a little bit safer than they previously were, because you can start creating manual controls over things. It's a really important place to be. And since we're there, let's go up the list here just a little bit. Marozzo often uses the term entrare, entering. And this is something that you have to know how to do, right? If you are out of contact, or remember we talked about range before, if you're out of range, if you're out of contact range, you have to be able to enter into the play. And if you're changing ranges from long range to short range, you have to be able to enter in to that new range. And entering is a difficult skill, and it's one that actually has to be trained. It's not something you can just arbitrarily do. And then he uses these terms. Gyoko here just means, it's play. It's the term that we use for plays. Think like a football play, right? A sword fighting play. So these are kind of the routines that we go through to learn how to use the sword. And there are wide plays, which is largo, and there are narrow plays, which are stretta. And my Italian pronunciation is terrible, and I'm not rolling my R's and all that kind of stuff. But it is what it is. So there's wide plays, narrow plays, and there's grappling, and there's entering, and there's the half sword. These happen to all be things that we need to understand in a Wing Chun perspective as well. So if I take a different color and write that out, wide play in Wing Chun we refer to as long bridge. Now, because we're using the term long bridge, right, any other time we use the term bridge, which is really what we'd be saying here, the half sword, our narrow plays are in the pocket. We don't have a special term for that. That's just our baseline range. And so our baseline range is in the narrow play area, where you're already able to bridge, where you're already able to cross swords. And we have to spend a lot of time doing entering. We actually use the term entering in Wing Chun. And then, of course, we have our Chisao, sticky hands. In Chinese martial arts practice, once you're in that range to grab and hold, they use the terms na and shuai, and it's the Mandarin pronunciation. But basically hold and throw. You can, of course, strike, and in Wing Chun we definitely prioritize striking. But once you're in those bridging situations and you're sticking, you are binding and bridging and manipulating those things, you start entering into these presse type things where you are manually moving and controlling, trying to create opportunities and remove threats so that you can get to your attacks, whatever they be, whether it's a strike, a throw, a lock, whatever. And so this same platform is used between Wing Chun and fencing, and the systems are quite complementary to one another. It's really incredible to see. Fencing really kind of opened a lot of opportunity in my brain to experiment and play with some of the ideas in Wing Chun and to embody them more readily for myself. And so we have one more thing to say about Marozzo. And, that's here, he says, right, talking about the narrow plays, thus I counsel you to present these things only to men who have good hearts, because they will do them without any concern, and will be the ones who do you honor. But as for those who seem to you not to have such character, present them the things that are found in the first assault, because if you were to try to teach them such things as are found in the second and third assaults, you would drive them away, because they may not have sufficient spirit to do them. That's an important thing, right? The narrow play is difficult because you're in range. What do we talk about when we talk about chisao, when we talk about fighting in the pocket, when we talk about close quarters combat? Essentially, what defines being in the pocket is that you can both hit each other and do damage without moving. You are both in the danger zone. And I remember earlier I said it can make you safer than you were before. Well, yeah, because if there's a range discrepancy, but just a reach discrepancy between you, the longer reach doesn't have as much power in the pocket. So for a smaller opponent versus a larger opponent, or for a shorter weapon versus a larger weapon, you pretty much nullify the benefits of the longer reach. It is an incredibly useful tool. And we even see this in MMA, where people who are boxers and kickboxers, once they get closed in on by a grappler, it's the grappler's game most of the time. And why is that? Well, because as soon as you take away their power to extend and strike, they don't have much left, unless, of course, they can transition over to grappling, which, of course, is what the game of MMA is. But it was one of the problems we saw in early MMA when not everybody had that more fleshed out skill set. And right here, what we're seeing is something from 500 years ago saying, no, you need to have this whole skill set, but understand the narrow play, getting in close, getting in the pocket is difficult. And you need to be able to kind of have the balls to pull it off. You need to be able to do it and do it well, because that's the only way you're going to actually create that pocket of safety that it can offer you. Otherwise, all you're doing is standing there waiting to get hit, and that's not a good thing. And again, we see that grappling take over right in there. And despite what a lot of people say about Wing Chun not having any grappling techniques, they're just flat out wrong. Literally, the first move on the wooden dummy is a collar tie. Can't tell you how many grabbing and holding and pulling moves that we use. It may not be full on wrestling, but some of that stuff's in there, and then we can make justification for so much more. And so what we're seeing is between 16th century fencing and 1950s Wing Chun, we're seeing the same platform, we're seeing the same structure, the same framework for developing a fighter into a full-blown, well-rounded guy. One of the other cool things about Marozzo is he didn't just teach the sword, the one-handed sword. He taught the one-handed sword with a variety of shields, with the dagger, with the cape. He taught the two-handed sword, a variety of pole arms, the dagger by itself, and even presse against a dagger if you are empty-handed. He goes through and tries to be conscientious about giving you as much chance across as many options as possible that were common to his day. Wing Chun, we only have the two weapons. We're not really we're not a fencing system in this sense. We're a fencing system in that we use the common militia weapons of the day, the spear and the knives. Those were just common issue in the militia, not the regular military, the civilian militia. But the fact is, it's the same concept. You start with the wide plays. Why? Bigger is easier to remember, and bigger is easier to grasp, and it feels safer. We all have an instinct to know that range is safer. Spears tend to beat swords 9 times out of 10 because of the range, not because of the skill. So we know that range matters. And then once you learn that, when you learn how to make that work, You learn how to close that distance and work in the pocket. You learn how to make up for a deficit. You learn how to get in and take away range. You learn how to dominate fight from the inside. That's incredible. And then, once you kind of figure out how to enter and get in and play in that close range, you learn how to grapple and put them on the ground. And then you're even more free to pull your dagger and shank them, right? So there's a progression here of wide play, narrow play grappling that we kind of see in Wing Chun as well. Long distance, close distance, sticky hands. And that sticky hands can include grappling. So what we're looking at is the same platform, the same concept. And so if you're a Wing Chun practitioner, or if you're a fencer and you want to be able to link these things together, these systems, and it doesn't have to be Marozzo, and it doesn't have to be Wing Chun, but if you fight close range, or you do a style that can be long to close range, and you want to enhance that, learn fencing. There is so much to be offered between 15th, 16th, 17th century fencing that will help your empty hands. It's just an immense amount. It really, really changes how you think about it. And if you don't like the historical stuff, go ahead and do Filipino martial arts. That's a really common thing, especially for Wing Chun people to do. That's a great one. I've done a bunch of it myself. Just happen to have friends and training partners who do it, and I like it. I just happen to like this better personally. I'm not even saying it is functionally better. I'm not going to get into a sword fight in my lifetime, not likely. But it helps me understand what I do. It helps me understand my own baseline better. You could do a lot worse than studying Marozzo along with your Wing Chun, or studying fencing along with your close quarters combat. It really helps you understand things so much, and understand how similar things are. And yes, the differences matter, but understanding how similar things are is so important. So I've rambled on enough, and I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, give the dog a bone. You can follow us on our other social media accounts, and if you really like us, you can head over to Amazon and buy a shirt. You can also go over to Gumroad and purchase some of our instructional courses. All of the links will be provided, and also on our website. If you happen to be in the Phoenix area, we would love to meet you. Come drop in for a class, even just to chat. And if you're looking for a new home, we would be happy to have you. So until next time, good journey.